Yo, what's good? Big Z here, and today I wanted to share with you guys some mixing tips. And mixing is a really hard thing to make a video on, because what mixing really is thousands of different tiny little decisions within your arrangement, but at the end, all those tiny little decisions add up and make a great mix. So today I'm going to bring you guys into a project of a track that I'm currently working on that sounds like this. So I'm just going to give you guys a little behind the scenes of how I would go about mixing this track. By the way, I do have a mixing and mastering service where I'll mix and master your guys' tracks for you. So the link will be down below for that if you want to go check it out. So the most powerful tool you can use in mixing by far is referencing. Referencing is like a cheat code for mixing, because you can listen to this successful track that's had like hundreds of millions of plays or whatever, and you can compare it side by side with your mix to see how it holds up. So I never recommend buying plugins that you don't need, but if there's one plugin you ever buy, it should be this one. And I use it on every single track. Because in your master bus, in this master bus I have here, at the end of my chain, I'm going to put this plugin called Sample Magic AB. And what that allows me to do is AB a successful track that's already out with my mix right in the project. So what you can do here is load in any track you want. You can just pick whatever tracks you have downloaded on your computer. In this case, I chose a Martin Garrix track that was kind of like progressive house sounding, because this track is a little progressive housey, I guess. So I'll show you what track it is that I've loaded up. It's called High on Life. There we die. And if you're mixing the drop, what you're going to want to do is go straight to the drop and loop it so you can go back and forth. So now I have my reference track properly looped. Now I can just switch back and forth between this drop and my drop. And what I want to do is make sure they're the same volume by looking at this meter over here. So once they're about the same relative volume, you can start mixing. And the best trick for reference mixing is taking sounds, bringing them all the way down in volume, and slowly mixing them back in. So you can do this with a full bus of sounds or just individual sounds. So like in this case, when I want to know how loud I should put my lead sounds in the mix, I'm going to go over here to my lead bus and bring it all the way down to 0, no sound. And I'm going to slowly mix it in while I'm A-Bing with that Martin Garrix track, while I'm hearing how loud his leads are, to make sure I have about the same level in my track. So now that they're about the same level, I can start looking at other things while I'm paying attention to these leads. So it kind of sounds like his leads are a little more airy than mine. Now I can go into my mix and kind of diagnose what's going on to make my lead sound a little more airy too. So I have a couple different lead layers here. And this is the layer I think will make it sound more airy. So what I'm going to try to do is turn down this main lead layer and turn up that airy layer a little bit to match the Martin Garrix song. So now my track is already starting to sound better after just mixing it for a couple minutes there. Referencing is the most powerful mixing tool because you can use it for everything in your track. You can reference how loud the snares are or the claps are in another track and make sure your claps and snares are about the same volume in yours. And if you do that throughout the whole mix, then things will come together and your overall mix will start to sound a lot better. So now I'm going to mix the kick in using the same technique. So you just keep going back and forth until you get the volume levels right. So now if you have the volume levels where they want to be and something still sounds off, then you can go to EQ or mess with the volumes of different layers or whatever you want to get it sounding more like your reference track. So now I want to talk about something that I've actually never seen anyone else talk about. I don't know if it's a thing or not, but it's something I do for every mix. And it's frequency specific referencing. And how I do that is on my master chain. After this Sample Magic plugin, I put an EQ. And what that allows me to do is EQ both the reference track and my mix. So I'll turn this EQ on and you'll see both songs will be able to come through this EQ. So now what I'm going to do is mix each part of the frequency spectrum differently. So now I'm going to take this low pass EQ and just have it go up to like 300 hertz so I can just mix the bass of the track and reference it with his bass. And while I'm doing this frequency specific referencing, I open up a metering plugin after the EQ so I can see the general levels of each track in that frequency spectrum. So right now I'm getting an RMS of like 12.5 for him and like 13 for me in this frequency area. So that means I can probably turn up my bass a little bit. And the bass that happens to be in this frequency spectrum is this main bass. So it probably means I can turn up the bass in my mix a little bit while watching this meter. So now they're both around the same relative volume to each other. And what I'm going to do is go through the whole frequency spectrum and do this with a different part of it. So I'm going to go back to my EQ here, and now I'm going to go to the next section, like the mid-range, from like 300 hertz, a little more than 300 hertz, to a little over like 1,000 hertz. So just from listening to it right now, it sounds like mine has a little too much presence in the mid-range, where his mids are a little quieter, which would be better for the overall mix. So it sounds like my synths are the culprit, which are these right here. So what I can do to fix this right away is go into my synth bus and take this EQ and cut out some of the mids. Sounds like my leads are causing a little trouble in the mid-range too. So I'm going to go into my lead bus. Instead of EQing them this time, I'm actually going to use a multi-band compressor, and I'm going to suppress the mids a little bit on my leads too. So I'm going to do like 300 hertz to like a little more than 1,000. So now my mids are sounding more like the mids on my reference track. They're a little more tamed. So now I'm going to keep going and go up the frequency spectrum a little more. This time I'm going to go from like 1,000 hertz to like a little below 5,000 or something. So obviously the tracks are different tracks, so when you're A-Bing them, they're not going to sound the exact same. You just want to make sure the overall level of each section in the frequency spectrum is similar. So in this case, it sounds like that main lead is causing a little bit of trouble, this lead right here, because there's some harsh frequencies around this area. So what I'm going to do on that lead is take a multi-band compressor. I'm going to put it in the same range that we're looking at, like 5,000, maybe like 2,000 to 5,000 hertz, something around there. And I can go more extreme with it at first and then mix it back in. So now I've tamed those annoying frequencies a little bit and it's sounding more like the reference track. So now I'm on to my last zone in the frequency spectrum that I like to do, which is like 5,000 hertz and up. And this part is just to get the very high end of your mix right. And in this case, it actually sounds like the high ends even out and they're pretty similar. So I'm actually not going to mess with my high end because I think it's sounding pretty good. But let's go back and listen to the overall mix now and turn all this stuff off. So now it kind of sounds like my mix is holding its own against Martin Garrix's mix, which is a great thing. And from going back and forth all those times, I know that, and I can keep going back and tweaking certain things to get my overall mix sounding better and cleaner. So I've just done this for the drop section. Normally I do it for the drop and then go through the verses with maybe a different reference track that sounds like my verses and do the exact same thing. Alright, well that is part one of my mixing tips. There'll definitely be more down the line because I could talk about mixing forever, but referencing is definitely the most important thing when it comes to mixing. So hopefully you guys learned something from this video. Make sure to follow me on Instagram and Spotify below. Other than that, I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.